From dispensing information regarding the day's events to spreading gossip about character traits or the affairs of a person, humans are natural-born storytellers. With the inception of the species some 200,000 years ago, before the creation of civilization, relaying information in a cohesive and entertaining manner from one person to the next was and still is a reason Homo sapiens continued to march onward. A small tribe wouldn't last if none of the hunters or gatherers recall spotting a different group of hunters close by while telling their account of the day's search for food. Humanity would be without religion if it weren't for those trying to make sense of the natural phenomenon around them and conceptualized entities of immense strength to explain why they exist. Morality, as everyone knows it, would be non-existent if not for the authors and storytellers of their time constructing and reciting narratives that impart an important lesson onto their audience that continue the harmonious flow of society. It makes sense for the stories created and shared around a particular place to establish a cultural canon, choosing the best works that best define that place and its people. However, although some stories have similar themes, does not mean they're played out the same way. Take for example two books in the American literary canon, The Great Gatsby and Of Mice and Men, a story about the rich and a story about the working class. The thing tying these two works together is their messaging about the American dream, but both works go about it differently. In the case of The Great Gatsby, Jay Gatsby, despite the riches he amassed for himself, could never win over Daisy because of their differing statuses on the social hierarchy, and because of said class difference, the green light on Daisy's dock was always an unattainable goal for Jay. Whereas for Of Mice and Men, making even the slightest attempt to aim for something better is an exercise in futility when the exploitation and the social atomization of the worker is factored in, making Lenny and George's lofty goal of owning a farm even more difficult. Both works express the idea of the American dream from two different ends of the social ladder. Now imagine holding the mantle of a superhero along with others who have done the same, being part of an ever-expanding continuity of heroes who follow in the footsteps of the original on a multiversal level. In short, there are many different faces, but they all don the same mask and match the story beat for beat. What happens when one hero tries to stick to the script, another almost falls for it, and the last one tries to rewrite it? And with that, let's talk about Across the Spider-Verse. Spoilers ahead for Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and maybe a comic or two, so viewers' discretion is advised.
We are supposed to be the good guys.
With great power comes great responsibility. It's an expression originally found in the Amazing Fantasy comic issue number 15. Relegated to the caption at the end of the story, is now attributed to Uncle Ben as words of wisdom passed along to the original web-slinger, Peter Parker. It's a message meant for those who have near infinite means, influence, and or strength not to use these tools frivolously, lest misfortune befalls those who do not heed the advice. Take the king sitting on their throne for example. Although he looks secure behind the protective walls of his guards, his noble allies, and the literal walls that bar enemy kingdoms from invading and can project and enjoy their power however they please, there's always an ever-looming threat no matter how much one plans for it will cause the eventual downfall. For Damocles, it's the sword dangling over his head. For most people, it's their hubris. For those who give their lives to fight crime, it's the logistical negligence that places their loved ones in harm's way. If that sword doesn't cause a daisy to sprout when it drops, then it's time to figure out how to keep that sword from falling again. Which is the biggest predicament for the film's deuteragonist, Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Woman of Earth 65. She's meant to be the measuring stick for Miles to aspire and eventually become, with Into the Spider-Verse portraying her as one of the more competent web spinners, with her swinging from place to place and dispatching enemies with the grace of a dancer. Though she becomes friendly with Miles, she still holds reservations about whether he's capable of upholding the mantle, as she and the other spider people grill the kid on if he can do what they can to send them back home. Needless to say, she wasn't that impressed, but eventually she comes around when Miles finally grows into his powers. In Across the Spider-Verse, she still maintains that role, but now she shares main character duties. See, her competence stems from her personal belief that the death of Peter Parker falls on her. He's the one in the background getting bullied, whereas she's the knight in shining armor that constantly steps in to save her princely best friend. He's already a fan of Spider-Woman's heroism, and his friend Gwen Stacy exhibits those same character traits. He's upset he can't handle the bullying problem on his own, as he is the damsel in distress. So Peter concocts a potion that would make him special as an immediate solution. Unfortunately, it turns him into their universe's lizard, who she beats. When she sees him revert back to his human form after getting trapped under a bunch of rubble, she instantly freaks out. It was her best friend in harm's way who just wanted to be like his friend Gwen.
I just wanted to be special. Like you, Gwen.
Then he passes on in a similar way. Earth 616's George Stacy dies in Peter's arms. She couldn't save her best friend, so she saves everyone else, with perfection being the only thing that matters. So much so, she essentially swears off almost any social interaction, quitting the band she was the drummer in, considering herself a solo act for their distractions.
In this line of work, you always wind up a solo act.
For any superhero, concealing one's identity is half the job, lest those close to them become a liability once they put the pieces together. After she, along with Miguel O'Hara and Jessica Drew, subdue the Vulture, she's confronted by her father, Captain Stacy, who believes Spider-Woman is responsible for Peter's death. She tries revealing her true identity, thinking it might be the saving grace to compel her father to lighten up, but he continues to recite her Miranda rights.
You have the right to remain silent.
What?
Anything you say can and will
Dad,
be
are
used
you
against
really
you in a
this
court of
afraid of
law.
me?
You have the right to an
Dad,
attorney.
stop!
Instead of lightening up, he doubles down. His duty as a police officer outweighs his responsibility as a father when his daughter is under distress. This scene runs opposite to the scene from Into the Spider-Verse when Miles' father puts an APB out on Spider-Man, believing he killed his estranged brother Aaron. Although Officer Davis lacks important context, his anger is justified, yet he immediately curbs those feelings after watching Spider-Man save the city from Kingpin's Super Collider. Keep in mind, as officers of law enforcement, both father sentiments on the web-slinger are exactly the same. No vigilantism on their watch. The difference being, Officer Davis is more flexible with their code of conduct and can understand a great asset when it comes around compared to Captain Stacy, who strictly plays it by the book.
I look forward to working with you.
yeah, me too, I guess. But I don't approve of your methods, but we're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
Which does him no favors when it comes to his interaction with his daughter, who now views him as another person she has to push away in lieu of the vital support system she so desperately needs. Which gives her more reason to join the Spider Society, which gives her an opportunity to find her tribe in the many different spider people all corralled at Nueva York in Earth 928. Speaking of social interaction, as mentioned, she does make one friend, Miles Morales, seasoned enough to understand the life of a wall crawler but still too green to get the bigger picture with his 1+ years versus her 3+. She wants it to stay that way because being a spider person is already hard enough. Add on the information she's privy to about canon events, and the recipe being cooked is one with a side of disaster waiting to be served, and she'll do anything to keep Miles from taking the first bite. From there on, she's fighting against the clock, doing what she can to cushion the hit Miles will have to take by keeping him as blind as possible to the truth.
Wendy, how much have you told him? About his place and all this?
A little.
Maybe not enough.
Unfortunately, she does herself no favors with the strategy, considering how her next assignment from the Spider Society is in Earth 1610, Miles' home universe, and instead of doing her job, Gwen goes on a web-swinging bonding session with Spider-Man. Anyone can understand blocking a few hours to visit a friend they haven't seen for a year, especially if the work assignment is close by. But when a person allows a prior obligation like stopping a multiversal thread go by the wayside for an afternoon and evening hangout session with said friend that shouldn't be interacted with because certain information could send that friend on an existential crusade, it can really complicate things. Then again, no one ever envies being the bearer of bad news. Everything Gwen does is meant to preserve Miles' innocence, from masking the reason for her visit to downplaying his likelihood of becoming a member of the Spider Society, to even concealing the true nature of canon events and the overall role he plays in the grand scheme of things.
I was doing both.
And the ironic thing is, that was Gwen's sword of Damocles. She spent too much time trying to shield her friend from the pressures of the world. Miles goes against her anyway after he peeled back lie after omission after obfuscation, ultimately severing ties from her. It almost mirrors the feelings Earth 65's Peter Parker felt when he decided to create a potion just so he could be as extraordinary as his friend. Her heart's in the correct place, but when does one's protection begin stifling the growth of the protected? Naturally, this question segues into the concept of the canon event. Without divulging too much information until the next part, the short explanation is that all spider people have to suffer the same way. Earlier in the film, when Gwen and Miles converse on top of the Williamsburg Bank building, she mentions how
In every other universe, Gwen Stacy falls for Spider-Man. And in every other universe, it doesn't end well.
implying to Miles her death will always happen, indicated by the comic and the movie adaptation where this event comes to pass. And what reason does she have to doubt it? She already lost a beloved friend in Peter Parker, Captain Stacy despises the heroine because of the murder she committed, and seeing that the Spider-Man continuity dictates that her father must die because he's a police captain, she opts to let it happen. Up to this point, it's not like she has a choice in the matter. Canon is canon. But Gwen's proven wrong just by watching and listening to Miles. In many moments of the film, Miles constantly questions and defies general expectations of Spider people, stopping canon events from happening with the respective universe still intact. Presents the counter-narrative of not having to follow the same story one wears the mask of, even rebutting her postulation about Gwen's in Spider-Man with the line,
"Well, it's the first time for everything, right?"
which ribs off on her after she gets booted back to her home universe and confronts her father a second time. He tells her he quit the Force.
My job, being captain, this whole thing doesn't matter anymore. You're the best thing I've ever done.
Guaranteeing her canon event never happens. That becomes inspiration for the creation of her own band of Spider People where she is the leading act. But she wouldn't have done so if she didn't realize
We're the same. In the important ways, you know?